All right, seventh graders. So on Tuesday, I asked you to look through a variety of microscopic images using a virtual microscope. And I asked you to look at a variety of microscopic images that I had found for you and to sort them into living and non living categories. Then you were supposed to look at each of those images and make observations in each of these categories for the things that were living and non living. So let's look at these together: uniform or varied shape. The first category is shape. So, is the shape uniform or mostly the same throughout? Or is it varied, different shapes throughout? As I look at my living things, I notice that these all have the same basic shape throughout. These all are very similar to each other as they are here and here. These ones are also similar. It's a little bit harder to tell because these are cheek cells and they are so thin and they were spread on a slide. And so they were caused to kind of separate, and some of the individual cells sort of floated, or rather, folded over on themselves. But you can tell in general, it's a circular ish shape with a dark circle in the center. Now, if we look at the non living things, the sugar crystals and salt crystals definitely appear to be uniform throughout. Not so much with the microplastics, although there is potentially some similarity there. But as we're coming over here to the ribbon, we're seeing less uniformity throughout the whole thing. So for our living, then, we would write it is uniform, and our non living, it is varied. Additionally, are the living things grouped or separate? Well, with the exception of the cheek cells, these are all grouped. Now, again, these are grouped inside of our body, but the way that the slide was prepared makes them look as if they are not. You can kind of see that this clump right here is grouped together. This is grouped together. So, in general, when we're looking at living things, the units are grouped. So, again, arrangement of units, are they grouped, kind of clustered together, or are they separate? So in living things, they are grouped. In non-living things, they are separate. Is there a pattern or is it random? Well, there's definitely patterns here. One could say there are patterns here. In this particular sample, there are patterns in this collection of non-living things, although not all non-living things are patterned. So we could say pattern. And this does sometimes have patterns, but it is also sometimes random. Is there an outer boundary? All right. So on each of these little circles, that's one cell, and there is a clear boundary. And our onion skin is even easier to see. Each one of these little rectangles is one cell. You can see clear outer boundary. Each rectangle here for the allodia is a cell. The little green circles inside are cell parts that we'll get into later. But you can see there's very clear boundary. And again, very clear boundary here. Looking at the ribbon and the salt crystals, sugar, microplastics, um, it's a little bit harder to tell, but in general, non living things may sometimes have a boundary, but oftentimes they do not. So we'll say yes, there is an outer boundary. And sometimes an outer boundary, but not always. All right. And then are there inside parts? Well, yes, definitely. And then no. The final thing that you're going to want to do is make a generalized statement. So something to the effect of observations. So your ending statement might be something like mine. Observations using microscopes can be used to identify patterns among living things.